teachings, practices, interpretations, and opinions presented in this series reflect the traditions and perspectives of the Temple of the Two Guides and the Church of Thessaly exclusively. They are not presented as universal to all forms of Hellenic, Hellenistic, Neoplatonic, pagan, polytheist, occult, or theurgical practice. Ancient traditions were historically diverse, and modern practitioners likewise hold a wide range of beliefs, customs, and interpretations. This series is intended as a presentation of our own temple tradition, philosophy, and religious practice.
For all these, who came forth from Gaia and Ouranos as the most terrible of their children, were hated by their own father from the beginning. And soon as any of them was born, Ouranos put them all away out of sight in a hiding place in earth, and did not let them come up into the light, and he rejoiced in his evil deed.
At this point in the story, we encounter a major turning point in the development of the cosmos. Up until now, Ouranos has served an important role. He was brought forth to enclose Gaia, to give structure to her generative power, and to help establish stability within creation. But something changes. The very authority that was meant to support and sustain life begins to work against it. Hesiod tells us that Ouranos hated these children from the beginning. From a Thessalian perspective, this hatred is not really about moral judgment, it is about fear. Ouranos recognizes the tremendous power, unpredictability, and potential contained within his offspring, and rather than guiding that power, he attempts to suppress it. This is the first time in the myth that authority ceases to shape power and instead seeks to hide it. That distinction is important. The purpose of authority is not simply to maintain control. The purpose of authority is to bring order to emerging possibilities so that they can contribute to the flourishing of the whole. When authority abandons that responsibility, it begins to work against its own purpose. In other words, when structure no longer serves life, it becomes hostile to life. The myth deepens this lesson by telling us that Ouranos hides his children within Gaia herself. This creates a profound inversion of cosmic roles. Gaia is the Great Mother, the generative ground of existence. Her nature is to bring forth, nourish, and reveal. Yet because of Ouranos' actions, she is forced to become a prison. The symbolism here is powerful. Repression never affects only the thing being repressed. It distorts the very environment in which that repression occurs. And what happens to power when it is buried rather than integrated? It does not disappear. It grows. It accumulates. It becomes increasingly volatile. This is why later conflicts within the divine order become inevitable. What is denied a lawful path of expression will eventually seek expression without law. The same principle applies in human life. Talents that are ignored do not vanish. Questions that are never addressed do not cease to exist. Problems that are buried often return with greater force. Whether we are dealing with individuals, communities, or institutions, suppressed potential tends to re-emerge in unexpected and sometimes disruptive ways. The myth also tells us that these children were prevented from coming into the light. For the ancient Greeks, light was more than illumination. Light represented understanding, recognition, and participation in the ordered cosmos. To come into the light was to become visible, known, and integrated into the larger structure of reality. To be denied the light was therefore not merely to be hidden, it was to be denied recognition itself. From a Thessalian perspective, this represents a failure of initiation. Ouranos does not educate these powers. He does not guide them. He does not integrate them into the cosmic order. He simply silences them. In doing so, he abandons one of the most sacred responsibilities of leadership. The role of authority is not to prevent power from emerging. The role of authority is to bring emerging power into the light, where it can be understood, named, ordered, and ultimately sanctified. This is why the passage serves as an important warning for religious leaders. Initiation withheld without a just reason eventually ceases to be protection and becomes corruption. The final detail is perhaps the most revealing. Hesiod tells us that Ouranos rejoiced in what he had done. This tells us that his authority has now become tyranny. The problem is not simply that he exercises power. The problem is that he delights in concealment. Authority exists to serve the good. When authority begins to take satisfaction in suppressing others, it has lost its orientation toward that good. At its root, tyranny is often driven by fear. Ouranos fears succession. He fears what might come after him. He fears being replaced. Because of that fear, he attempts to freeze the cosmos at his own stage of development. He refuses to allow the natural process of succession to unfold. Ironically, this creates the very conditions that will eventually lead to his downfall. By refusing to yield, he generates the opposition that will ultimately force him to do so. This prepares us to understand Kronos' revolt in a different light. The myth is not simply describing a rebellious son attacking his father. It is showing us what happens when authority refuses to fulfill its proper function within the larger order of the cosmos. For Thessalian priests and priestesses, the lesson is direct and practical. Any authority that suppresses emerging power rather than guiding it toward lawful expression repeats the mistake of Ouranos. The task of sacred leadership is not to control power, but to steward its emergence. A good leader brings what is frightening, disruptive, or unfamiliar into the light of understanding. A good leader helps integrate new possibilities into an existing order rather than burying them out of fear. True sacred leadership does not conceal power. It reveals it, orders it, and directs it toward the service of the gods and the flourishing of the community. That lesson will continue to unfold throughout the rest of the Theogony, as the problem created by Ouranos eventually gives rise to succession, revolt, and the emergence of a new cosmic order.
But Gaia groaned within, for she was constricted, and she devised a tricky, evil stratagem. At once she created an offspring of grey adamant, and she fashioned a big sickle and showed it to her own children. And she spoke, encouraging them while she grieved in her dear heart. Children of mine, and of your father's evil outrage, if you will obey me, we should punish the vile outrage of your father, for he was the first to devise unseemly deeds. So she spoke, but dread seized them all, and none of them uttered a sound. But suddenly, great crooked-counselled Kronos took courage and addressed his cherished mother in turn with these words. Mother, I would promise and perform this deed, since I do not care at all about our evil-named father, for he was the first to devise unseemly deeds. So he spoke, and Gaia rejoiced greatly in her heart. She placed him in an ambush, concealing him from sight, and put into his hands the jab-toothed sickle, and she explained the whole trick to him. And great Ouranos came, bringing night with him, and spreading himself out around Gaia in his desire for love, he lay outstretched in all directions. Then his son reached out from his ambush with his left hand, and with his right hand he grasped the monstrous sickle, long and jagged-toothed, and eagerly he reaped the genitals from his dear father, and threw them behind him to be borne away.
At this point in the story, the consequences of repression begin to reveal themselves. Up until now, Ouranos has succeeded in keeping his children hidden within Gaia, but the myth makes it clear that repression does not simply freeze a situation in place. It creates pressure, and that pressure affects more than those being suppressed. Hesiod tells us that Gaia groans beneath the burden placed upon her. From a theological perspective, this is significant. Gaia is not simply upset or distressed. She is being prevented from fulfilling her very purpose. Her nature is to bring forth life. Her function within the cosmos is generation, emergence, and manifestation. Yet because of Ouranos' actions, she can no longer do what she was created to do. The generative ground itself has become constricted. This reveals an important principle. When lawful emergence is denied, the resulting tension does not disappear. It accumulates. The pressure continues to build until some form of release becomes inevitable. For this reason, Gaia's response is not presented as an act of spontaneous anger or malice. She is responding to a condition that has become intolerable. The cosmic order has reached a point where correction is no longer optional. This establishes an important lesson for Thessalian theology. When order refuses correction, counter-order eventually arises as a rupture. The cosmos possesses a tendency toward balance. When legitimate channels of development are blocked, corrective forces begin to emerge. This is where the adamantine sickle enters the story. Gaia fashions a sickle from adamant, a substance associated with what is unyielding, incorruptible, and unavoidable. Notice that this instrument is not connected with eros, attraction, or desire. It is born from necessity. The sickle represents something new within the cosmos. For the first time, deliberate separation becomes a cosmic act. Up until now, creation has unfolded through generation and emergence. Now the cosmos introduces limitation. This is an important distinction. The sickle is not primarily a symbol of destruction. It is a symbol of boundary. It represents the moment when authority that refuses all limits must itself be limited. In Thessalian theology, this teaches that corrective violence enters the cosmos only after mediation has failed. It appears not because it is desired, but because every other avenue has been exhausted. The story then reveals another aspect of the crisis. Gaia gathers her children and asks who among them will act. What happens next is telling. None of them answer. All have suffered beneath Ouranos. All have experienced the same oppression, yet fear silences them. This is one of the most realistic moments in the entire myth. Most people do not resist oppressive authority. Most endure it. Even when change is justified, fear often overwhelms responsibility. This is why the passage serves as an enduring warning for communities and institutions. Tyranny does not survive solely because of the tyrant. It survives because fear prevents others from acting. Silence becomes part of the system. The burden of correction then falls upon the few who are willing to act when others cannot. In this case, that figure is Kronos. What is important is that Kronos does not present himself as morally superior. He does not claim to be wiser, holier, or more virtuous than anyone else. He simply agrees to act. His opposition is directed toward the position occupied by Ouranos, the enclosing principle that refuses succession and prevents new forms of life from emerging. This distinction matters. The myth does not portray Kronos as a righteous hero riding in to save the world. Instead, he is the one willing to break the stagnation that everyone else has learned to tolerate. His courage is therefore complicated. It resolves one imbalance, but it also introduces another. The lesson is that necessary action and perfect virtue are not always the same thing. Sometimes change is brought about by people who are themselves incomplete. Sometimes those who end one problem later create another. The myth prepares us for exactly that possibility. Gaia then conceals Kronos and instructs him in deception. This part of the story is often uncomfortable, but it contains an important insight. Once trust has been destroyed, correction rarely occurs through open dialogue. Authority that hides others eventually finds itself confronted in secret. The myth is not celebrating deception. It is showing us what happens when visibility and trust have already been lost. When authority refuses transparency, it forfeits the possibility of transparent correction. The confrontation itself takes place when Ouranos returns and spreads himself over Gaia once again. This detail is important. He arrives in desire, unaware that the relationship has fundamentally changed. The same act that once provided structure has become domination. The same enclosure that once sustained creation now prevents it. His authority has lost its legitimacy because it no longer serves the purpose for which it was established. Then comes the famous act itself. Kronos strikes. But notice what he actually does. He does not destroy Ouranos. He does not erase him from existence. Instead, he removes his generative power. This is not merely an act of violence. It is a theological statement. The cosmos places limits upon authority that refuses limitation. Power is not annihilated. It is constrained. That distinction is essential. The cosmos does not erase its origins. It places them within proper boundaries. This moment establishes a principle that will echo throughout the rest of Greek theology. Power that refuses to yield voluntarily will eventually be limited forcibly. Succession denied peacefully returns violently. Yet the story immediately introduces a warning. Kronos succeeds in ending the repression of Ouranos, but later, Kronos himself will become afraid of succession. He will repeat the very pattern he helped overthrow. This is one of the deepest lessons in the entire myth. Ending tyranny does not automatically create wisdom. Removing an oppressor does not automatically produce justice. Necessary acts of correction do not guarantee that those who perform them are themselves rightly ordered. A person can become an instrument of cosmic necessity without becoming a model of divine harmony. For Thessalian priests and spiritual leaders, the lesson is direct. Repression produces rupture. Silence enables tyranny. Correction undertaken without reverence often creates repetition. Neither Ouranos nor Kronos fully understands the responsibilities of sacred leadership. One suppresses emerging power, the other corrects through force. Both ultimately fail to achieve lasting harmony. The task of the sacred leader is something different. The task is to recognize emerging power before it becomes a threat, to initiate it before it becomes resentment, to guide succession before it becomes revolt, to release what must grow before constraint hardens into violence. This is why the story is preparing us for the arrival of Zeus. Zeus will eventually represent something neither Ouranos nor Kronos can achieve. He will reconcile authority, power, and succession within a single order. For us, the lesson is simple. Leadership that refuses humility will eventually be corrected. But leadership that embraces humility can spare both the community and the soul from unnecessary suffering.
But not in vain did Ouranos' genitals fall from Kronos' hand. For Gaia received all the bloody drops that shot forth, and when the years had revolved, she bore the mighty Erinyes and the great giants, shining in their armor, holding long spears in their hands, and the nymphs, whom they called the Melian ones, over the boundless earth. And when at first he had cut off the genitals with the adamant and thrown them from the land and into the strongly surging sea, they were carried along the water for a long time, and a white foam rose up around them from the immortal flesh, and inside this grew a maiden. First she approached holy Cythera, and from there she went on to sea-girt Cyprus. She came forth, a reverent, beautiful goddess, and grass grew up around her and beneath her slender feet. Gods and men call her Aphrodite, the foam-born goddess, and the well-garlanded Cytheria, since she arrived at Cythera, and Cyprogenes, since she was born on sea-girt Cyprus, and genial, since she came forth from the genitals. Eros accompanied her, and beautiful Desire stayed with her as soon as she was born and when she went to the tribe of the gods. And since the beginning, she possesses this honor and has received as her lot this portion among human beings and immortal gods, maidenly whispers and smiles, and deceits, and sweet delight, and fondness, and gentleness. But their father, great Ouranos, called them Titans, strainers, as a nickname, rebuking his sons, whom he had begotten himself, for he said that they had strained to perform a mighty deed in their wickedness, and that at some later time there would be vengeance for this.
And now we have come to a point in the story where Hesiod introduces one of the most important principles in the entire theogony. Nothing that happens within the cosmos is without consequence. Even when an act is necessary, even when it corrects an injustice, it does not simply erase what came before it. The act of Kronos ends the oppression of Ouranos, but it does not end the effects of that oppression. Those effects continue to unfold throughout the cosmos in new and unexpected forms. This is why Hesiod tells us that the blood of Ouranos falls upon Gaia. Notice that the blood does not disappear. Gaia receives it. She transforms it. And over time, new forms of life emerge from it. From a Thessalian perspective, This teaches us something important about justice. Justice is not simply punishment. Justice is not immediate retribution. Justice is the way consequences unfold through reality over time. The cosmos remembers. Actions continue to bear fruit long after the moment that produced them has passed. From the blood of Ouranos arise three distinct forms of consequence: the Erinyes, the giants, and the Melian Nymphs. Each represents a different response to the same event. The Erinyes represent moral memory. They are not merely avengers who descend from above to punish wrongdoing. Rather, they symbolize the principle that actions carry consequences within the structure of reality itself. The cosmos remembers injustice. The cosmos remembers imbalance. The Erinyes are that memory made living. The giants represent something different. They embody force born from unresolved violence. They are power that has emerged from conflict but has not yet been integrated into a larger harmony. They are strength without reconciliation, energy without resolution, the consequences of rupture made visible. Then we come to the Melian Nymphs. These figures often receive less attention than the Erinyes or the giants, but from a theological perspective, they are extraordinarily important. Their name comes from the ash tree. In Greek thought, the ash tree was associated with resilience, endurance, tools, and weapons. It was useful, adaptable, and capable of being shaped into countless forms. The Melian Nymphs represent a transition. They stand at the threshold between divine existence and mortal existence. They are neither fully divine nor fully human. Instead, they represent the point at which divine substance begins to pass into the material world. This is why some later traditions connect humanity with ash trees and with beings associated with them. The myth is not necessarily saying that human beings were literally created by the Melian Nymphs. Rather, it is saying something more profound. It is describing the conditions that make humanity possible. Through the Melian Nymphs, divine power becomes material substance. Divine blood becomes wood. Wood becomes tools. Tools become shelters, spear shafts, instruments, and eventually, civilization itself. In this sense, humanity emerges not from perfect harmony, but from transformed conflict. That is an important lesson. Human beings inherit strength without divinity, memory without immortality, creativity without cosmic authority. We possess tremendous potential, but we do not naturally possess perfect wisdom. This explains why human life is marked by both craftsmanship and violence, by both nobility and moral struggle. The Melian Nymphs are therefore not our ancestors in a biological sense. They are our ancestors in an ontological sense. They represent the moment when divine power becomes mortal possibility. And because humanity emerges from the aftermath of cosmic rupture, we require something that the gods do not. We require law. We require ritual. We require initiation. We require education. Unlike the gods, we do not naturally embody harmony. Unlike monsters, we are not pure force. We stand somewhere between those two extremes. Our task is to seek alignment through wisdom rather than through power alone. The broader lesson is that correction never completely erases the past. Even necessary actions leave residues. Every reform creates consequences. Every rupture creates after effects. Every victory leaves something behind that must eventually be addressed. This is why sacred leadership requires long-term vision. Success alone is not enough. A leader must understand what their actions will produce generations later. The story then takes an unexpected turn. From the blood of Ouranos come the Erinyes, the giants, and the Melian Nymphs. But from another part of the same event comes something entirely different: Aphrodite. This is one of the great paradoxes of Greek theology. Beauty emerges from violence. Attraction emerges from division. Love emerges from a wound. The remains of Ouranos are cast into the sea, and from the foam that forms around them arises Aphrodite. From a theological perspective, this is not simply poetic imagery. It is metaphysical instruction. Aphrodite teaches that the cosmos possesses the capacity to transform division into relationship. Where force has torn things apart, attraction seeks to bring them together again. Her birth shows that reconciliation is every bit as fundamental to reality as conflict. Notice that Aphrodite does not emerge from the earth, as the earlier beings did. She emerges from the sea. This is because the sea receives what the land cannot contain. The sea mediates and transforms. And from that process emerges a goddess whose power is fundamentally different from the powers we have encountered so far. She does not command, she does not conquer, and she does not compel. She simply invites. Eros and desire accompany her immediately. This is important because it shows that attraction is not something learned later in creation. It is primordial, and it belongs to the structure of reality itself. For us, this means that love is not just an emotion, it is a cosmic force. It is one of the ways the universe continually seeks to restore connection where separation has occurred. At the same time, Hesiod is careful not to romanticize this power. Aphrodite's domain includes delight and gentleness, but it also includes persuasion, whispers, seduction, and deception. Attraction is powerful precisely because it bypasses force. It influences rather than commands. And because it influences rather than commands, it always carries a degree of ambiguity. This teaches us that relational power must be handled with discernment. Love can heal division, and desire can restore connection. But neither automatically produces wisdom. Aphrodite softens the world. She does not govern it. Her role is transitional. She prepares the conditions for harmony, but harmony itself still requires law, justice, and wisdom. Finally, Hesiod tells us that Ouranos names his children Titans. This moment is easy to overlook, but it contains another profound lesson. Naming is an act of memory, and memory preserves consequence. Even after his defeat, Ouranos ensures that the event will not simply disappear. The act remains part of the story of the cosmos, and so the consequences of that act remain active. From a Thessalian perspective, this is more than a curse. It's a recognition of reality. The cosmos remembers unresolved imbalance. Until reconciliation occurs, the consequences of an act continue to echo forward through time. This prepares us for everything that follows. The conflict between Titans and Olympians has not yet begun, but its foundations have already been laid. The victory of Kronos is not the completion of the story. It is merely the beginning of a new chapter. And that chapter teaches one of the most important lessons in sacred leadership. Victory is not completion. Correction is not reconciliation. Ending an injustice does not automatically establish harmony. Blood may become justice. Violence may become nature. Division may become desire. But none of these alone completes the work. The mature leader learns to hold all of these truths together. Beauty may indeed arise from tragedy, but tragedy still requires a reckoning. Love may heal division, but love alone cannot govern rightly. Power may correct injustice, but power on its own cannot create wisdom. The cosmos is moving toward a more complete order, but it has not arrived there yet. That higher integration will finally emerge under Zeus, who will seek to unite power, justice, memory, desire, and authority into a single harmonious order. Until then, the cosmos remains creative, productive, and alive, but also unstable. And in many ways, that condition mirrors our own souls, our communities, and our institutions whenever they have survived a rupture but have not yet achieved harmony. As we bring this lesson to a close, it is worth reflecting on just how much has changed since the beginning of the Theogony. What began as the emergence of Gaia and Ouranos has now become a drama of authority, succession, repression, revolt, consequence, and transformation. We have seen how Ouranos attempted to prevent emergence by concealing his children within the earth. We have seen Gaia's response to that repression and Kronos' willingness to act when all others remained silent. We have seen how even necessary correction carries consequences that continue to unfold long after the act itself has passed. Most importantly, we have seen that the cosmos never simply moves backward or forward, it transforms. The blood of conflict becomes justice in the Erinyes. Violence becomes force in the giants. Divine power becomes mortal possibility through the Melian Nymphs. Division itself gives rise to Aphrodite, whose power seeks to restore connection where separation has occurred. Yet none of these developments resolves the crisis entirely. That is the lesson Hesiod wants us to understand. Victory is not completion. Correction is not reconciliation. Ending one imbalance does not automatically create harmony. The cosmos remains creative, productive, and alive, but it is still unstable. And perhaps that is why this portion of the myth speaks so clearly to us today. Individuals survive hardship yet continue carrying old wounds. Communities overcome conflict yet struggle to restore trust. Institutions endure periods of reform yet often discover that deeper integration is still required. The same pattern appears in the soul. We correct one problem only to discover another. We overcome one limitation only to encounter a new challenge. Growth continues because harmony has not yet been fully achieved. For Thessalian theology, this is one of the most important lessons of the Theogony. The goal isn't power, it isn't freedom, it isn't correction. The goal is harmony. The goal is the proper integration of power, justice, memory, desire, authority, and wisdom into a living order that allows all things to flourish according to their nature. That order has not yet appeared, but its foundations are being laid. The age of Ouranos has ended. The age of Kronos has begun. And yet Kronos himself will prove unable to achieve the harmony the cosmos seeks. The tensions we have explored in this lesson will continue to unfold, preparing the way for a new generation of gods and a new vision of cosmic governance. In our next lesson, we will examine the reign of Kronos, the birth of the Olympians, and the great conflict that ultimately leads to the rise of Zeus. We will discover why the Titans themselves become subject to succession, and how Zeus emerges as the first ruler capable of bringing together authority, justice, power, and wisdom into a more complete expression of divine order. Until then, remember this: the cosmos remembers. Every action leaves a consequence. Every consequence becomes a lesson, and every lesson becomes part of the long journey from chaos toward harmony. Thank you for joining us for this exploration of Hesiod's Theogony. May the gods guide your studies, illuminate your understanding, and lead you ever closer to wisdom.